Esteemed colleagues, today we shall examine a peculiar empirical finding, a universal biological tempo. We will then explore this finding through the lens of a highly theoretical framework, one that attempts to connect this biological pulse to the very fabric of quantum physics, and indeed the cosmos itself.
Let us begin with the central enigma. Across the animal kingdom, from insects to mammals, biologists have observed a surprisingly consistent rhythm, a common tempo, in their social communications. You can see it in the synchronized flashing of fireflies. You hear it in the calls of birds. The question is, what could possibly account for such a deeply shared biological metronome?
This rhythm is not at all random. It consistently clusters around a frequency of approximately 2 Hz, or 2 cycles per second. This is a specific, universal tempo that appears to transcend physical size, environment, and evolutionary history. A finding like this begs for a fundamental explanation. It is highly unlikely to be a series of mere coincidences.
Our inquiry today will proceed through 5 sections. First, we'll examine the empirical evidence for this universal rhythm.
Then we will introduce the theoretical framework of topological geometrodynamics.
From there, we'll see how it might apply to our very DNA, connect it to neuroscience, and finally explore its rather profound implications for a model of cosmic biology. So let us begin. Section 1. Delineating the characteristics of this observed phenomenon, its empirical foundation. The consistency of this tempo is quite remarkable. It's been observed across an incredible diversity of species and appears to be independent of their physical size. It pertains specifically to social communications, think lights, calls, dances. What's more, it aligns with a known neural processing efficiency band of between 0.5 and 4.0 Hz. And as a curious aside, it also corresponds to the tempo of most popular music. All of this strongly suggests a deep, resonant, biological constant. So, how do we begin to explain this? Well, this brings us to Section 2. We'll now introduce the theoretical apparatus we might use to interpret this finding.
Topological Geometrodynamics, or TGD.
It is, to say the least, an alternative physical ontology.
A core distinction lies in how TGD conceives of electromagnetism. In the classical Maxwellian view, fields propagate in space-time. In TGD, however, these fields are posited as having a physical topological structure. Specifically, they are described as monopole flux tubes, which together form what is called a field body for any given physical system.
So within this framework, every biological entity possesses what is termed a field body or magnetic body. It's a topological field structure associated with the physical system, and it is proposed to carry matter phases that behave somewhat like dark matter. Critically, it is considered the TGD counterpoint to classical fields and is posited as a primary agent of control and communication.
Another critical concept is the effective Planck constant, or HF. In TGD, this parameter labels a hierarchy of matter phases. The key takeaway here is that a large HF value indicates macroscopic quantum coherence. In other words, it allows for quantum effects, which are typically confined to microscopic scales, to actually manifest macroscopically within biological systems.
All right, that brings us to Section 3. Let's now apply this framework directly to that 2 Hz phenomenon, and we'll focus specifically on the role of DMA.
The central thesis here is that communications within the TGD model occur at the cyclotron frequencies of ions. These ions are proposed to move along those monopole flux tubes of the magnetic body, with communication taking place via so-called dark photons at these specific frequencies.
And here is something truly remarkable. If you examine the masses of the DNA base pairs, you will find that the mass of an adenine-thymine pair is, for all intents and purposes, identical to the mass of a cytosine-guanine pair. The implication of this is quite profound. It suggests that any DNA strand, regardless of its particular genetic code, will have a universal cyclotron frequency.
This then suggests a hierarchy of endogenous magnetic field strengths organized in octaves. A field of about 0.1 Gauss corresponds to a cyclotron frequency of roughly 0.5 Hz, the lowest octave. If you double that field to 0.2 Gauss, you get about 1 Hz, which aligns with Blackman's findings in biology. And if you double it again to 0.4 Gauss, you arrive at approximately 2 Hz, the very communication tempo we've been discussing.
Now for Section 4. The model's explanatory power may extend even further into fundamental neurophysiological processes like the nerve pulse and the electroencephalogram, or EEG.
Here, TGD posits a profound connection. It suggests that the energies of these dark photons, determined by the formula E equals H effective times frequency, must correspond to the Coulomb energies of the cell membrane potential. This creates a direct, resonant link between the ion cyclotron frequencies and the energetic state of the neuron.
And as this table illustrates, the correspondence is quite striking. The octave hierarchy of frequencies corresponds precisely with the known energy ranges of cellular and neuronal membrane potentials. You see, 0.5 Hz corresponds to the energy at the lower bound for ordinary cells. 1 Hz maps to the lower bound for neurons, and 2 Hz corresponds to the upper bound for neurons. It's a remarkably tight fit.
And finally, Section 5. The TGD framework extends this model of biocontrol from the cellular all the way to the astrophysical scale.
Let's consider the solar magnetic body. The model proposes that, at the scale of our solar system, the relevant cyclotron period scales to approximately 22 hours, which is, of course, remarkably close to one Earth day.
Then, at the galactic scale, the model yields a cyclotron energy of approximately 98 gigaelectron volts. For those familiar with particle physics, that value corresponds directly to the weak boson mass scale, a truly provocative alignment.
This scaling logic implies that these fundamental flux tube structures grow to immense, even astronomical sizes. As you can see, the estimated radii range from about 5 meters for the Earth's system to tens of thousands of meters for the Sun's and up to over 100 million meters for the galaxy.
Thus, to quote the theory's proponent, Matti Pitkänen, the cyclotron frequencies in the endogenous magnetic field associated with the magnetic body are crucial for the biocontrol and communications and for TGD-inspired theory of consciousness. The central proposition, then, is that a single mechanism of cyclotron resonance within a nested hierarchy of magnetic bodies governs biological function at all conceivable scales.
We are left, then, to contemplate a rather provocative question. If biology is indeed coupled to physics through quantum resonance across all scales, what does this imply for the fundamental nature of life and of consciousness itself? That is a question worthy of deep consideration.